Here's the thing I always come back to with real estate, because you're hearing a lot of voices out there where they're saying you should never buy, you should just rent, you should
Yeah.
buy as much as you can. Personally, I'm always going to have at least one house. And it's for the simple reason that I watched Austin, Texas. I watched the rents just go through the moon
Yeah.
in 2020. I saw so many people displaced, and we've seen that around the country where, I'll get calls from people who are 70, 80 years old, and they'll say, hey, my landlord passed, their kid's selling the house. I can't afford rent anywhere around here. I don't know what to do. Maybe I can buy a house. So I think a little bit of pain up front, because look, in most places, your mortgage is going to be more expensive than rent when you first buy. Okay. 5 years, 10 years from now, that's not true. So I'm always thinking long run, because the concept of being, 70, 80, 90 on a fixed income and being at a landlord's mercy, especially with more and more corporate ownership coming into the market, it terrifies me.
Hey there, and welcome to Money and You. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. My search for more fulfilling work led me to career and business coaching, where I stumbled upon a game-changing discovery. Money issues often start with our mindset and habits. You see, our relationship with money is the key to overcoming those frustrating financial obstacles. As an entrepreneur, coach, and problem solver, I'm passionate about helping you create a great relationship with money. Because, turns out, that's the foundation for a limit-free life. Each week on Money and You, I speak with amazing guests about all things money, mindset, practical tips, and everything in between. We're here to give you new insights, education, and empowerment so money can be one of your favorite relationships. So join us for some lively conversations and let's transform your financial life together. Hello, hello. Welcome to the Money and You show. I am super, super excited about this episode. If you are thinking about buying a house, if you are, a home buyer already, the show is for you. If you're a first-time home buyer thinking about it, getting ready, this is the show for you. This show is going to cover so much ground in the area of home buying, real estate, mortgage lending, and I am just tickled pink to have such an experienced, amazing guest with me today. So I'm not going to waste any time here. I'm going to jump right in and introduce you to Jennifer Beeston, who is a nationally recognized mortgage and real estate expert, celebrated for her commitment to financial literacy and consumer advocacy. In addition to being the #1 VA loan officer in America, her expertise extends across all loan categories, consistently ranking her in the top 1% of mortgage lenders nationwide. Jennifer's mission is to make the complex world of home financing accessible to everyone, from first-time homebuyers to seasoned investors, by providing clear, practical advice that empowers individuals to achieve their financial and home ownership goals. With over a decade of experience, Jennifer has been featured in major media outlets like U.S. News, Business Insider, Time, and NBC News for her insights on mortgage, real estate, and personal finance. Her popular YouTube channel is a trusted resource for homebuyers and investors alike, offering easy-to-understand content on home buying strategies, mortgage planning, and financial empowerment. Jennifer advocates for transparency in the mortgage industry and is deeply passionate about financial education. Her ability to simplify complex financial topics makes her a sought-after speaker and podcast guest, inspiring audiences to take control of their financial future with confidence, which is what I want for you all. And I am so pleased to introduce Jennifer. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. I've been listening to your YouTube channel, and I don't listen to much YouTube. I don't really have time. So it's been really great. And I just want to right off the bat tell people, if you want an education in this real estate area, your YouTube channel is a phenomenal place to go. So I'd love for you to, tell people what it is. And also, I would like to start this show on a positive note with, some ideas for the upcoming future year. And I just want people to hear from you the way you're looking at 2025, because there's so much out there. And I actually listened to a show that you did on predictions for 2025, and it was so uplifting, which is so wonderful in today's world to hear that kind of discussion. So take it away. I'll let you jump in there.
Well, thank you for all of that. That is all very flattering, and I appreciate it greatly. Here's the deal. Home buyers have been put through the ringer for the last few years. You had 2020, 2021, where interest rates were incredibly low. However, you had so much competition, it was soul crushing. I literally thought in those years that I was more of a therapist than a mortgage lender, because people were having to write so many offers, getting beat out by cash. It was brutal. Then you had 2023, where rates suddenly just started spiking. They went from 3.2%, hopefully I'm getting this right, 3.2% to 6.2 by December. That's in 1 year. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. And then in 2024, we started seeing rates come down a little bit, but it's an election year, and election years have all those uncertainties. I'm really excited about 2025 because I think it's going to be the most normal market that we've had in a long time. And I think buyers, I think everybody needs that. I think the industry is tired. But like, there's a lot of great things about it. It's like, look, our housing going to be less expensive in 2025? No. I mean, across the country, we saw houses appreciate approximately 5.2%. They're estimated to go up another 3.9, and it's a national average, but there's so many loan programs available right now. I've never seen this assortment of loan programs in my entire career. And I've been a mortgage lender for 18 years. So there's a ton of opportunity right now. And I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, thank you. I was excited to hear that too. And you know, I don't think the average person knows that those opportunities exist or where to go seek them out. So is it your mortgage lender who's going to be the one to tell you about this? How do people find out about these programs?
Yeah, look, I think talking to a mortgage lender is really important, because you can go online and you can find some information. My YouTube channel is a great source for that, right? Mm-hmm. But depending on your situation, like let's say that you need down payment assistance and you're in Georgia, you know, there may be a specific county program unique for your situation. So actually talking to a lender about where you're at and what your goals are, we can then go through our database of what we know and say, okay, yes, this, not that. Because a lot of the information in the news, it's dead wrong. And if you listen to it, you'll never buy a house because you'll think you don't have a chance.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that. And I really want people to hear that, whether you're listening to the regular news, whether you're listening to your news on TikTok, I mean, wherever you're getting it. You know, you've mentioned sort of why it has to be so sensational. And you might want to just, talk about that a bit again. But, you know, when it comes down to it, things like the real estate market, they're not even particularly, it's not even a political conversation, really. It has to do with so much more. And also people out there do feel that they can sort of quickly educate themselves on real estate, for example, and then go out and tell the world, you know, how to think about it. But somebody like you has so much more expertise and has seen it and understands it so much better. And so I really, you know, like with anything, whether it's health information or real estate information, I mean, you have to really be picky about who you're listening to and where you're getting your information from.
Yes. And here's the thing. I was reading this article just the other day. Sorry, my earpods keep on trying to escape. And it was called Nine Signs You're Ready to Buy a House. And it was from a major publication. So I looked at it. Everything was wrong. Everything was wrong. And it was all relating to mortgages. It was like, oh, you should have a year in reserves and 20% down, and your debt to income should never be over 36. And I was like, oh my God, who is the source for this article? Mm-hmm. This is like what, 1984? Someone Googled this. It was a Manhattan real estate agent. They don't do loans. And that's part of the problem too, is that you've got people like real estate agents should not be educating on mortgages. If you're getting your mortgage information from a real estate agent, you might as well get it from your veterinarian. Okay. And I think that's the problem. And look, in fairness, I'll get, questions about real estate contracts, which isn't my world, but I'll always say, hey, you need to talk to a real estate attorney, or depending on state, your actual real estate agent.
Yeah. And just because somebody's had a good experience with real estate or done a couple of things that made them a lot of money or whatever, that doesn't make them an expert. It makes them an expert on their own experience and what happened for them. But that doesn't translate necessarily to other people.
No, and let me give you a great example. And look, I do think people should share their experiences about home buying, because I think that more people need to know how achievable it is. But for instance, a while ago, there was a video on TikTok that went super viral. And it was a woman dancing in snow, talking about how she bought a second home with 3.5% down, and she was Airbnb-ing it. It was an FHA loan. That is a owner-occupied loan. She basically went on TikTok and danced about committing mortgage fraud. And people were like, oh, how can I do this? How can I do this? And it was like, she never should have gotten that loan for that purpose, because that's not the way the loan works.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. And I do love your channel because it's very matter of fact. You're very clear. And the information you're providing is just, some of it I've just never heard another person in your industry really talking about. And so you're really speaking directly to the people I can tell that you've worked with and who have come to you with these questions or problems. And so I personally think anyone even at all engaged in real estate should be listening to it. I think it's really good. So, and I don't say that to everybody or about everybody. So let's talk a little. One of the topics that you speak a lot about is, how do you get ready? Like, what makes a person ready to buy their first home? And I suppose we could also get into what makes somebody ready to be an investor. But let's start with the first-time home buyer.
Yeah, so I think the first-time home buyer, like, the biggest question I always ask is, are you ready to commit? And the reason why that's a question I ask is because buying a house is a commitment. If you buy it and you decide you don't like it a month later, it's not easy to get rid of. So the first thing is, are you ready to commit to a certain area? The next thing is job stability. Do you have to have been in the same job for 2 years? No. But should you have some level of stability, of knowing roughly how much you're going to be making per month? In terms of credit history, your credit history doesn't have to be perfect, but you do have to be on time with your bills. Like, I can't stress that enough. If you don't have a credit score, it's okay. We have other loan programs for that. Are you paying rent? If you're paying rent and you're doing well, okay. If we look at buying a house, how much more is that payment? And is that something you can handle? So my first step would be to put together a budget and put down how much you think you can pay towards housing every single month. And then we reverse engineer from there to see if it makes sense. But you have to be ready to make a commitment, because if you're not, I don't want you to buy a house and then try to sell it in a year and not be able to and feel stuck. So that's one of the biggest questions, because sometimes people are like, oh no, I actually have a job where I'm likely going to move in a year.
Right.
Okay, maybe we shouldn't buy right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your whole budgeting discussion, because I've heard you say, if you're not willing to spend an hour sitting down and doing a budget, you probably shouldn't buy a house. And yeah. I agree with that. And I feel like, and the other thing that I was really interested in is qualifying for a loan versus actually being able to pay your bills, including your loan payment. So do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, and look, it's the industry's fault. I'll be honest. You've got mortgage companies saying, apply now, we'll give you an approval in 10 seconds. You've got real estate agents saying, just go shopping, find it, we'll make it happen. But you really need to know the math. Okay. And the reason why I want people to start off with a budget, and when someone fills out an application with me, one of the questions we ask is, how much are you comfortable paying monthly? and we don't max qualify. So it's very important you know what max qualifying is. Max qualifying is how most lenders qualify people for mortgages. They look at what the max they can get you approved at. It is the path to poverty. We are not looking at expenses such as daycare. We are not looking at your DoorDash bills. We are not looking at how much you traditionally have paid for housing. They're just going to the max they can get the system to approve. The math before, once you're approved, making sure the lender's going through the payment, making sure it works within your budget, it's so critical to long-term happiness. Mm-hmm. That's the key. I'm not trying to make people budget to torture them or torment them. I want them to be happy long-term. And doing that extra step is the key.
Yeah. Thank you. And, this really speaks to the topic that I love, which is your relationship with money. And,
yes.
Because this balance of fear and sort of stretching yourself, so that you are attracting more of what you want. And so it is a bit of a balancing act. And this budgeting is so important to give you a look at what's really happening. And if you're being offered more of a loan than maybe your budget can support, that's a decision that you have to make. And there are variables. I mean, maybe you can actually earn a little extra than what you're currently earning. There are things where you can tweak whatever in your life so that you can make it work. But it's important. Without the information, you don't even know what you have to do. So
and I think people like if you get a pay stub, it's really important to look at your net pay as well, because lenders don't qualify off of that. So I can have a buyer in California versus a buyer in Florida, and I qualify them for the same amount. Well, guess what? This one has a lot of state income taxes. Right. This one doesn't. So that's why I'm always just cautioning people to really be their own advocate and really pay attention to the numbers, because ultimately they're the ones that have to write the checks every month.
Right. And I loved what you said somewhere too about, you have to factor everything in. If you're buying a latte every single morning, that's not showing up. The lender isn't seeing that. And so you want to make sure that you can, make whatever decision you want to make with regard to your lattes.
You don't want to give it up, right? Like,
right.
That's the thing is a lot of times I'll hear, well, I'll change my spending habits. Because I'll literally be sitting there going, look, you won't even be able to buy toilet paper. Like, this is not a good idea. And it's the whole concept that a house will make someone change. And look, it can make you change in the short term, but that's not really how financial habits work, at least from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for those people who do aspire to own real estate, and maybe they're a little on the edge with doing this, what is a mindset that you should adopt? Because, there are those people who say, I won't do anything until I can pay for it entirely. And that's one end of the spectrum. And then other people who, are pretty comfortable with being on the edge. So
here's the thing I always come back to with real estate, because you're hearing a lot of voices out there where they're saying you should never buy, you should just rent, you should buy as much as you can. Personally, I'm always going to have at least one house. And it's for the simple reason that I watched Austin, Texas. I watched the rents just go through the moon in 2020. I saw so many people displaced, and we've seen that around the country where, I'll get calls from people who are 70, 80 years old, and they'll say, hey, my landlord passed, their kid's selling the house. I can't afford rent anywhere around here. I don't know what to do. Maybe I can buy a house. So I think a little bit of pain up front, because look, in most places, your mortgage is going to be more expensive than rent when you first buy. Okay. 5 years, 10 years from now, that's not true. Mm-hmm. So I'm always thinking long run, because the concept of being, 70, 80, 90 on a fixed income and being at a landlord's mercy, especially with more and more corporate ownership coming into the market, it terrifies me. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that as a lender. I'm just saying that as a, Jennifer Beeston personal financial plan. I will have at least one house totally paid off Worst case scenario, if I end up in a bad spot, I can do a reverse mortgage and live off that house for the rest of my life. Worst case, that's my situation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I feel the same way. And sometimes I don't know if it's because of my age that I feel, I mean, that's how I grew up, you know, but I still can't find another argument that, you know, kind of negates that. I still, and I live in LA where rents are crazy and continue to get crazy. And I see people who could have a mortgage that was either the equivalent of their rent or less, but it's the saving for the down payment that is tripping them up too.
But I also think people think they need way more than they do for a down payment. You know, it's like in LA, for example, the new loan limit for 2025, it's over $1 million, which means 5% down, right? 5% down. You know, if it's under, I'm trying to remember all the new limits now. If it's under 8.0, it's like 802 and some change, 3% down. You know, there's this myth that you need 20% down or you're going to pay $1 billion in mortgage insurance. And the bottom line is mortgage insurance is surprisingly inexpensive if you have good credit. If you have terrible credit, mortgage insurance is expensive. You should look at FHA because it makes it more affordable. But, you know, most people, when I tell them how much the mortgage insurance is, they go, oh my God, I thought it was going to be so much more. Because the news shows you the horror stories, right?
Right. Yeah. So what would you tell people to plan for as a down payment?
So there's a lot of factors to that.
It's a terrible question.
But right? I would say it's like, look, if you're a military member or you served in the military, if you're a veteran, you don't need a down payment. Like seriously, you don't. VA 0 down. You know, conventional is 3% minimum for most loan amounts. FHA is going to be 3.5%. But there's also, depending on where you are in the country, there's a lot of really cool grants and down payment assistance. So if you're in a situation where, like, let's say your rent is like $3,000 a month and your mortgage would be $2,700 and you can't come up with the savings, I would say, let's look for a grant or something because the mortgage would improve your life. Now, if your rent is $3,000, your mortgage is going to be $3,500 and you can't save any money, well, we need to figure out how we're going to ever make that payment, right? That's our first step. Okay. So we would start saving up for a down payment there. But a lot of times people are like, well, I need closing costs as well. I have so many buyers where they negotiate with the seller to pay closing costs. And I think we're going to see a lot of that in 2025, like a ton. So, you know, save what you can. But at the same point, you can always just call a lender and talk about your situation. And we can say, hey, like, yeah, you should try to aim for this or that, or have you thought about this? Like USDA is an amazing loan in certain parts of the country that's 0 down, right? Like in a perfect world, yes, you should have at least 3 or 5%. But if you don't, or if you qualify for an amazing benefit like VA, you don't need it. And I think that's where the disconnect is. People think they have to or must, and it's not the loan world I see right now.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. And I want to just touch on the VA loans because you are the number one VA lender in America, which is pretty cool. But something that you said to me when we did a little earlier conversation was that's actually tricky as well. And I was really shocked, actually, that people who are, you know, getting a VA loan might actually get a bad loan. I mean, I'm using that term broadly, but do you want to kind of elaborate on that? I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. Well, so look, there's a lot to VA loans. VA loans are incredible. They have the most benefits, you know, 0 down, no mortgage insurance, lower interest rates than conventional. It's also where we see the most predatory lending behavior. And it's one of the reasons I got really aggressive about VA is because I saw what was happening. I thought it was wrong. And it's my career goal and mission to change it. And what's going on is VA buyers do not shop the rate and the fee. There's a lot of sleazy lenders out there saying, oh, VA sets the rates, don't worry about it. But they're ripping veterans off. I'll see a loan estimate. We had one just last week, where the buyer was being charged a rate of 6.1 and $17,000 in lender fees.
Wow.
We got them 6.125 with zero lender fees.
Wow.
I see this stuff every day, and it's like, it's the same loan. It's just the lender you talk to, some of them are totally aware that you're not going to shop, and they're just going to take your wallet with them. And a lot of times it's companies where you're like, well, wait a second, it has something military in the name, or, they say they help veterans, and it's like, well, yeah, they're helping you at the house, but they're taking your wallet and life savings with them. So veterans, more than any group, need to shop the rate and fee regardless of who the lender is. Even if it's me, shop me, like, do it.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. That's one of those sort of little known things that unless you're part of the industry and you're actually seeing what's happening, you would not know. I was totally surprised.
I didn't know for the first probably 5 or 6 years of my career, but then it was brought to my attention and I started digging and I started talking to experts, and I was able to get all this data that showed where different lenders were pricing. And now I just get it every day, and it's so wrong. Yeah. It's just so wrong. So we're going to end it. It's going to stop.
I love that. I love a woman with a purpose, or anyone with a purpose. So I think that's a beautiful thing. And people can call you from anywhere, right? You're licensed in most of the states, all the states.
I'm licensed everywhere but Rhode Island and Utah, and not for any specific reason. I got to 48 and I was like, I'm good. So no, 786-933-2077. We're 7 days. I've got gals on my team. Everyone's licensed in multiple states. Everyone has the same mission. No one's just clocking in and out. It's like industry veterans who've gotten together to make a difference. We have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can see that. And I also, the fact that you have your YouTube channel, you're actively trying to educate people on this topic, which I think is really so amazing. It is complicated. Yes. There's a lot. And like you said, there's so many people talking about it in different ways. So it's very confusing. So I love that there's a good source. And what are some other sources for people if they want to get more educated in this area?
It's tough, right? I'm biased. I'm like, please go to my YouTube, just because I'm closing, depending on the month, between 40 and 80 purchases every single month. So I see a lot. For reliable sources, maybe Housing Wire. The problem is, for instance, I spend a lot of spare time on Reddit in the first time homeowners thread. And the reason I do is there's so much misinformation. So someone will ask a question, they'll get a bad answer, then they'll get a good answer, and then 7 bad answers. And I think it's just really tough. So I really wish I will have to find something that I trust. But honestly, a lot of the stuff that I see, there's some mortgage influencers right now who have hundreds of thousands of followers and all these views. I looked up one the other day. They closed 25 loans last year. That's nothing, and that's kind of the problem. I think that's the problem in the industry. And I think, I know that's one of the reasons why I started doing what I was doing. There's not a lot of producers at my level who, there's no one else doing this right now. That's the simple thing. It's hard to be a full-time lender, and then a YouTube channel is another thing. It really has to be your passion.
Right.
And financial literacy is my passion.
Yeah. Okay. And so, if financial literacy is your passion, why? Because people were coming to you and sort of you were enlightened about how illiterate people were, or what is it?
No, it's a combination. It's like, look, I went to a great high school. I went to a good college. I knew nothing. I made every single mistake as a young person, going to college in those credit card tents, and you get a free sweatshirt and you can buy all those clothes your parents wouldn't buy you.
Yeah.
So I've done that. I had the bad credit, and when I got into mortgages, that's when I really started learning how everything worked. And I was like, oh, more people need to know this, because right now I would argue that for a large part, money how to handle finances, it's taught by your family, and that's why we'll see like cycles of poverty. It's because some people are getting really good information, some aren't. My family had the theory of just make a lot of money, you'll be fine. Like that was the financial advice. Just make a lot, you'll be good. You'll be good. And what I found over the years is like we're able to help so many people, and the information that I give out, whether they work with me or not, I know that it will help them, and then I know they'll tell their children. And the more good information we get out there, and the more we demystify home buying, like seriously, it should not be this big mystery, the more power, individual Americans will have. And that's what we need as a country, I think. I mean, not to get like, waving a flag, but like people need to be educated and in control, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I mean, not to go here, but I think women especially, and I've given a lot of thought lately, like why women, there's no difference in how, intelligent they are in terms of grasping the concepts or anything. It's just a matter of effort and time and interest. And women have many things going on, especially if they're raising kids or, I mean, it's so maybe some of these things, what I've seen with clients especially is they just pushed it. They thought, well, when I get time after, things settle down with the kids or whatever, I'll learn more about money. And all of a sudden they're, 40, 45 and saying, I just don't feel like I know enough. And so that's kind of my conclusion from just looking at it, that it's a matter of, we all have to jump in and learn it as quickly and early as possible and spend that time. It's a choice about, what am I going to learn? Where am I going to spend my time?
Well, and it's so interesting too, because when you really think about it, you think about school, and there are some states, I don't know the exact count, I think it's getting larger, but there are some states that are actually requiring financial education now. But how crazy is it that financial education isn't a basic part of our curriculum?
Yeah.
Like what?
No, it's so crazy. I mean, it's akin to how to eat properly. Like, why aren't we teaching nutrition to everybody too? I mean, there's some very basic things that we all have to engage in. It's not like some of us don't need to know about money. I mean, money is, going to be part of your life, whether you want it or not, or like it or not. And so some of these things, it is kind of, I don't know how people decided what we actually need to learn and not learn, but this is pretty basic.
I agree so much. It's like I've started talking to a lot of moms that are doing homeschooling.
I know.
Because I'm like, maybe this is going to be the difference. Maybe this is where we start, right? Maybe we start with the homeschooling communities, just because it's really mind blowing. But then you go to like credit cards right now, right? So everything's online. If you go and you look up your credit card, it's going to be pretty tough for you to find your interest rate for most credit cards. You're going to have to go to a statement, get to the last page to see that interest rate, right? And then people are like, Americans have so much debt. Of course they do. Like there's zero education, and then you've got 26, 29% interest rates, even with perfect credit. It's shocking to me.
Yeah.
A tangent, but a shocking tangent.
Yeah, it is. And you would think just to conclude with this, but it's one thing, I guess maybe you could make an excuse for high school, but in college, there's no more education than there was in high school. And then you're expected to, it goes back to what you were saying, just earn more while you're getting this degree and doing all these things so that you can potentially earn a good salary, but you still get out not knowing what to do with the money that you're making. And so you end up, whatever you make, you can spend. It's not like there's,
It's a reason everybody should just take, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes a week and just start learning about money, learning about how to protect themselves for the long run. Retirement is something I always think of. I don't know if my mom whispered stories to me about being 80 and eating cat food or something, but it's a real fear.
Yeah.
So I think that money is taboo in our culture. It's problematic. And we just need to all break through it and start talking about it and looking at ways to grow our money, invest our money, but just make sure that we're provided for, a nice life.
Right. And I think owning a home is a factor in that. I mean, again, maybe it's, the era I grew up in, but I feel like that's sort of a fundamental foundational asset that can give you, more security and all the things.
100%. Like some of the arguments right now is you'll see someone be like, oh, the S&P 500 has gone up more than the housing, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Can you sleep in it? Yeah. Like if something goes sideways, can you sleep in it? Because there is a lot of talk right now that's trying to talk Americans out of buying houses. And I'm kind of like, is this just to make it easier for corporations to buy the houses to then rent out to them? Mm-hmm. Because some of the voices, like Grant Cardone's a great example, who's always saying buying a house and living in it's stupid. He has a capital company where you can invest and then he buys rentals and you can rent that. Yeah. So it's an interesting time in American history. But look, I'll tell you the first thing that, and I'm already talking to my son about it, the first thing that we're going to be doing when he gets out of college and he has a job, he's getting a house. Mm-hmm. I wish I had done it earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did do it pretty early. It was not a great house and it was not in a great area, but I sort of thought the area would pick up. It was in Phoenix when I was in school. And I never could afford to do anything. Like I literally couldn't afford to buy some window curtains or anything. And I didn't make money on that, but it was a good experience I made mistakes, which also taught me some lessons. And I was sleeping in it. I mean, and so were my dogs, and it was good. I would have had to rent someplace anyway. So, but there were some good lessons in there. But I'm still glad that I got. That's the other thing is you learn from doing. And so, if you can start early, I was thinking of you because my daughter, she's obsessed. She's 24, but she's literally obsessed with real estate. She looks at Zillow way more than anybody I've ever seen. But and it's fear driven, and a lot of her peers are like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to buy a house? I'm never going to be able to have one. And they just have, because she sees the upward trends too in the prices, and she's been studying, how much I could have made if I bought this house 3 years ago, and so that's created kind of a lot of fear around it. Anyway,
is she in Los Angeles or is she in California?
Yeah, she's in LA.
And see, and that's part of the thing too. It's like, look, there's certain parts of the country that are just very expensive, and they're always going to be expensive. San Francisco, LA, Aspen, Miami Beach, Manhattan, like you're always going to have to make a truckload of money to buy there. Mm-hmm. But there's so many amazing places in America where you can still buy a nice house in a beautiful town for $300,000 and you can have a quality of life. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are starting to look for. They just want to go back to the basics. They want to go back to the quality of life. So I'm excited about that because there are Indiana, Oklahoma, Kentucky's growing. And you hear some of those states coming from California, which is where I used to be from. And you go, oh, what could they have? It's actually really interesting when you start looking. Like it's phenomenal. Like I moved to Florida recently and, I never knew how much I would love Florida. I love Florida. I'm obsessed. I'm Florida woman now.
Well, it's interesting because I've lived a lot of places as well. And I've seen, I've seen different places, obviously, and seen their real estate markets too. I think I have my own bias. I'm so used to California, and while the prices are very high, so is the prospect of appreciation and making money on your house. And then I look at other places and I think, well, you could buy a house more easily, but when you go to sell it, will you make any money? And so, you're talking about up and coming places, so I'm sure they would, but I don't know. Any thoughts on that? That's just sort of...
So the only properties, there's a couple types of properties that actually concern me in terms of if you're buying something for long-term appreciation. The first is condos. I think condos have a lot of inherent risks with them just because you could have a condo that's run really well right now, but if you get a bad management company in there, you can have some serious problems. And then in terms of areas, it's like, look, would I personally buy a house in a flood zone that was like Hurricane 10? No. Would I rent there? Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If you want to live somewhere where you know environmentally it's a complete disaster,
Yeah.
right? Rent. Okay. But if you're in Michigan, if you're in Texas, if you're in like even parts of Florida, there's a lot of Florida that's not terrifying. There's just a couple areas where it's like, do you like rebuilding? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I would watch out for. I think if you saw housing prices from 2019 to now, pretty much no matter where you were in the country, prices went up. And I think that if you're buying in that $200,000 to $500,000 range, there's so much room to go up.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And the condo comment is very interesting. I've always sort of wondered it because they are an option. If you can't afford the house, you could start with a condo, and
but they're more expensive than a house in a lot of cases. Like, there's a lot of chatter about Florida and they're like housing crisis. It's not actually a single family house crisis. It's that there were new rules that were implemented after the Surfside crash. And it's made it so condos, not just in Florida, but in a lot of the country, they have all these new requirements and these buildings aren't prepared. They don't have enough money. So owners are getting hit with assessments, with increased dues. So the condo thing is something where I hear a lot of people go towards it in retirement or they can't afford a house. And it's like in retirement, you need the most sustainable house payment you can. And with potentially rising HOAs, that makes me nervous. I know taxes and insurance will always go up, but and then if you can't afford a house, it's like if those HOAs go up again, like that's my concern. But yeah. I've seen some things.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. Along those lines, when we're talking about the environment and sort of the new issue of property taxes property insurance being very hard to acquire, that one was boggling my mind too, because for a little while in California, a few of them have come back. I was told I wouldn't be able to renew my insurance, and then it sort of worked out in the end. But I was thinking, how does that work? Like, if the insurers won't insure your home anymore, like, can you have that home? I don't know. That one was confusing me too.
So I think that unless you're in the super high-end luxury market, yes, if you're looking at buying a house, get a homeowner's insurance quote first and get it from a couple companies. Make sure you're shopping because there can be huge variances. But for instance, in California, they have the FAIR plan.
Yeah.
So if you can't get insurance through a traditional provider, you can get it through the California FAIR plan. However, there's limits. So if you have a $10 million house in California, the FAIR plan's not going to cover it. I believe there's supplemental insurance companies, but I'll be honest, I don't finance $10 million houses.
Right.
Florida has Citizens, right? So I think that, it's funny, right before we did this podcast, I was actually responding to a reporter about this exact topic. And my comments on it were just that, there's always going to be some level of insurance. Just make sure you know how much it's going to be. And this is something our legislators need to look at more and more right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And, I love this conversation where it's going too fast, but I want to touch on investment property a little bit and some of the differences. And then I want to swing back to 2025 again. I've got a couple more questions on that one. So, what for the person who wants to buy investment property, and maybe you have a property you live in or you don't, how do you feel about that? If you don't actually own the home you live in, but you want to just become an investor, is that wise or?
It's something that I've seen done in the past. We have clients, for instance, we had a lot of Google clients where it was so expensive near where they worked, they were buying in Sacramento as investment properties. So that's definitely something that we can do. And it can make sense if you're in a super high cost area like San Jose, LA, to still get your foot in the real estate market, start trying to build some appreciation. One of my goals next year is to buy at least one more investment property. That's one of my personal goals.
Okay.
So I think investing out of state can make a lot of sense if you can't afford to buy where you live. But if you can afford to buy where you live, I would always say buy your house first, then buy the investments.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, thank you. And what are some of the differences if you are looking at investment property that that impact you or impact the client as a lender?
Well, I mean, it's a different type of qualifying for sure. In some cases, like if you already have one property, I can use projected rental income to help you qualify for the next investment property.
Okay.
With traditional financing. So, we do that a lot. There's also programs right now, and you do have to already own a house for this one, but they don't even look at your income. It's based on the cash flow of the property you're buying. So there's a lot of really creative ways to help people get into investment properties. But is there a 0% down investment property? No, there's not a 5%, 10%. I haven't seen it. With an investment property, I would say be prepared to put down 20%, and then we can figure out the financing from there.
Okay, that's great info because you do hear the other. So you do hear that you can put zero down.
Oh, goodness. Well, here's one thing, though. So for instance, let's say that you buy a house. And so one of the things that I recommend with military members is I'm like, hey, look, buy a house at your first duty station. You're going to live there, for 1, 2, 3 years. When you go to the next one, we're going to turn that one into a rental and you're going to buy another one owner occupied. So that's something you can do if you don't have a lot of cash. You could buy a house and live in it for a couple of years, turn it into an investment property. You don't have to refi, rinse and repeat. Yeah. That would be the other way to go about it that a lot of people utilize.
Right. Yeah. But that's great. Great. And you reminded me, that's what I did with that sad little Phoenix house. I moved and then I just rented it for a while. So, interesting. Jennifer, is back to 2025. So you said it was going to be a more normal year, which everybody loves that word these days. So, anything normal sounds really great.
It sounds dreamy, right?
Yeah. So in what way? Is it interest rates? What is it that is going to make it more normal?
I think that interest rates, I think we're going to be conventional loans in the mid 6s. I think you'll see fluctuations up and down. You're going to have that volatility throughout the year as the new administration gets set up, as we see, who really gets into the seats of power. And we see what happens with tariffs, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to be keeping an eye on inflation. We've got to keep an eye on government spending, but it's not like 22, where it went from 3% to 6%. We don't have anything on the books where we're like, oh my God, it's going to go to 10 this year. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, we also don't have anything where we're going, hurrah, it's going to be 3%. For rates to drop dramatically, you would need some sort of economic turmoil or the government to start buying mortgage-backed securities, which they won't do unless it's a recession or a pandemic. So I think there's going to be more stability this year with rates, which we saw last year. Mm-hmm. I think it's not an election year this year, which thank goodness, because that always puts uncertainty into the market. I think that sellers are more realistic. After 22, it was a learning curve to get them to understand that, no, I'm sorry, sir, your house doesn't go up $100,000 a day. And I think that buyers are more realistic right now too, because buyers are like, okay, we had a lot of people waiting for rates to hit 3% again. And I think that most people have recognized it's not happening. Mm-hmm. So if you can qualify now and comfortably afford the payment and you love the house, great. If not, let's try to work those other pieces together.
Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. You are so interesting on this topic, and I love that you are so passion-driven around the whole thing. So please tell people how to subscribe to your YouTube channel, how to find you, how to talk to you and your team.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. So, look, my YouTube's super simple. It's just my name, Jennifer Beeston. If you want to learn about housing, all that fun stuff, check it out. If you have questions and you're like, I don't even know where to start, just call my team, 786-933-2077. We're happy to answer questions. We're happy to look at loan estimates, make sure you're not getting ripped off. We don't charge for any of this. So use our expertise, even if you're thinking of buying in 5 years. I actually had a 13-year-old girl call me once, and I gave her a plan. So I expect her to be buying a house by her 19th birthday.
Oh my gosh, that is a great way to end this. I love that. What a smart girl.
We're here to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're here to help. Like, I want people educated and empowered. So that's why we're here.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, it's one thing to have a 13-year-old, but I also want to encourage the older people, the women who like just are now like so ashamed that they never bought their house or whatever, and they don't want to call because it feels
no shame.
Yeah,
no shame. Never feel shame. Like, and look, I've had people say, "Hey, I'm 90. Like, are you really going to give me a 30-year mortgage?" And I'm like, "Of course I am." Like, we can't discriminate. Like, we love being part of the journey, no matter how old you are. Like, there's zero judgment on that.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I so appreciate the time and just the opportunity to chat with you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. So, and listeners, please, listen to this show, re-listen to it. There's great information in here, and follow Jennifer Beeston on her YouTube channel. You will be so much smarter when it comes to this whole topic. And, the more information you take in, the more ideas you generate. So if you're sort of stuck in this area, you don't know what you do, and you start educating yourself and in hearing these stories, you get inspired. You get inspired to have some new ideas. So, all right. Thank you so much for being here. And you can reach out to me at my email is Michelle, 2 L's, at limitfreelife.com. You can go to limitfreelife.com, check out my website. And we would love it if you would rate and review the show and share it with your friends. That would be fantastic. And we'll see you next week.